Okay. Pursuant to California Government Code Section 54953, all votes during this teleconference meeting shall be taken by roll call. Lisa, did we have any members of the public who submitted comments for the public appearances?
There were no public comments received.
Okay, and I don't see any
Yeah.
members of the public on here. So we're going to move right to the agenda item. But before we do, I'd just like to say something by way of introduction. Last month we had, I think, a good discussion about making some changes to the reporting that the committee's going to be looking at. And I think this month I would introduce things by saying kind of good news, bad news. I'll start with the bad news, which is we're just experiencing, I think, some normal growing pains in the transition from where we were to where we're going. The printed reports were not quite what we're used to, and were a little bit hard to read. And Lisa and I have already connected on that. And new reports, she was under the gun to get them out. We'll try to improve this going forward. Also, Myrna and I had a conversation, and Barbara, I want to give you credit again for insisting that we pay attention to the fund balance statements, which I had kind of been glancing at, but not really studying. And Myrna and I connected on a call in between the meetings to say, what do we really want to try to get out of these? And Myrna, to her credit, did some additional work and discovered that there were some errors in how we were reporting things. Unlike previous errors that have come before us, though, these are actually errors in our favor. And so what had happened, and I'm going to let Myrna explain all this, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up. What had happened, as you know, last year we set up a number of reserve funds to cover things like upcoming capital expenses and upcoming IT expenses and upcoming IT capital expenses. And as those expenses occurred, they were not being reflected as coming from those reserve funds, but instead were being reflected as coming from our overall general fund balance. So as a result, the reports that we were looking at were understating the amount of fund balance that we actually have available for budgeting. I'm going to let Myrna go into the details on this, and it's going to. She's still doing work. It's, we're not going to be at a final spot this month, but the good news is we do have more money available for budgeting than we thought. And Myrna's totally on top of what we want to get out of these reports, and I have every confidence that we will. So having said that, Myrna, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take us through the financial reports. Oh, one other thing. The other piece of good news, we're financially in good shape. Our expenses are running below budget. We only have 1 month of revenue and it's right on target. I know Myrna will talk about this more in detail. So big picture, we're in good shape. We're aware of some hiccups we have to sort through, and I feel confident that we will. So take it away, Myrna.
Okay, so thank you, Andy, for that. Thank you for your time, and I do appreciate all of the Finance Committee members' questions. They're very important, and so I appreciate that. And having received your questions, I've done some additional evaluation of the fund balance, but I would just like to give you an overview of where we are with revenue. Like Chair Elkins said, we only have 1 month of revenue reflected for this fiscal year. And we're in good shape, and it is higher than historically from last year. So we did expect a bit of an increase, not very slight, very, very nominal, modest. But it did come in a little higher.
Myrna, if
Excuse me, Myrna, I'm
I
sorry.
can, yeah, Andy has his hand up. I just
Oh,
want,
I apologize. Before we go any further, and I was remiss, you have a new important member of your team
oh, yes,
on
I
this
did want to
call.
introduce
Would you
her.
please
Sorry,
introduce her
yes.
to us? I apologize.
Yeah. So before we go on any further, Julie Brown is our new accounting manager, and we've long had anticipated to fill this position. And Julie started at the end of September. So she has a couple of weeks under her belt now, and she's adjusting really well. Julie comes from Sonoma State University, and there she was an accounting manager there, and so has broad experience in accounting procedures and putting together policies and procedures. And so we're happy to have Julie on board. And so Julie, do you want to say a few words?
Please do.
Oh, just thank you for the warm welcome. Super excited to be here and a part of the library right now.
Could you tell us just a little bit about yourself, in your background in Sonoma and what you like to do?
Yeah. So yeah, I worked at Sonoma State University as an accounting manager for 3 years previously. Before that, my background is in public accounting, doing taxes and auditing. That's most of my professional career. And in my free time, I like to go to a lot of concerts. So I like to keep it fun.
Fantastic. We're so happy to have you. Myrna's been very patient and persistent in bringing you on board, and I'm glad she was able to. So welcome, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Myrna. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair Elkind. So where we are today is a normal revenue cycle and expenditure cycles that I presented in my overview. I did want to say that you may have noticed that the $500,000 grant funds for the state regional library, from the state library for the new regional Roseland library were transferred to the new fund 74840. And so therefore there's a decrease in the property tax revenue from last month, but we were expecting this. We are anticipating the tax roll coming in for the first installments in December. And so we're where we expect to be in this time of the fiscal year. Sales tax, like I said, came in for our first installment for this year, and it is slightly higher by 1% compared to last year, and that's good. And on the expenditure side, why does this say August? That should say September. So our total library expenditures through September are $9.3 million, or 18.9% of our total budget, and we are at quarter of the year, so we're a little under budget. This can be explained mainly by our capital expenditures. There are two major refreshes that are calendared for this fiscal year, and we're in the planning process for those, and hopefully kick them off soon. But we'll start seeing some expenditures in the coming weeks. We have some normal attrition and vacant positions that contribute to salary and benefit savings. Also, as you know, we're anticipating to start our Sunday hours at the beginning of November. So we had budgeted for the entire fiscal year, but so there is some savings there, and we'll start seeing those expenditures come in on for Sunday hours in November. So I'm excited about that. And also just wanted to highlight the fund balance. You all had questions. We had quite a bit of discussion around the fund balance last month, and wanted to remind you that also the rebudget that was approved in September is reflected in this report. And that rebudget really is an impact on the fund balance. And I do have a presentation, and to try to explain what I heard last month was, what is the connection between the budget, these monthly reports, our summary page, as well as a statement of activity that shows calculations for fund balance. And given those discussions and a meeting with Chair Elkind, I did some further evaluation of the statement of activity, and the county accounting services group prepares these monthly reports for us. And so I had a conversation with their manager to look at how we were treating the reserves, the use of reserves that we established last fiscal year. And so establishing the reserves, it was new. As you know, we've always had the stabilization fund reserve, and but we've never utilized or have had to draw down on the stabilization fund or any reserve. So this is the first year that we're drawing down, and that's where we got a little stuck and did not reflect that drawdown in the statement. And I could go a little bit further in that, but I do want to share my presentation to try to connect all the dots and hopefully clarify our financials a little bit more. So I have a presentation. Can you see my screen?
No.
No, okay. Share screen, there we go.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And what do you see? Do you see my notes?
Yeah, we're seeing the slide and the next slide also.
Yeah. We're seeing your
so
notes.
You're seeing my notes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I have to do a swap.
Yep. There we go.
Okay. All right, great.
Perfect.
Okay, so I want to go over in a little detail for the statement of activity. So bear with me. I'm going to start with the budget that the commission approved back in June for this current fiscal year starting July 1. And at the time that the commission adopted the budget for fiscal year 23, it was the total revenues was $39.7 million. And the use of reserves of $7.4 million. So those were the reserves that were established in the last fiscal year. And a total of $48.9 million in total expenditures. because the total expenditures is greater than our sources, there is a net impact on your fund balance available for budgeting. So the library is tapping into that fund balance available for budgeting of $1.7 million combined, property tax and sales tax. Now let's see how this then ties back to our monthly summary report. So here you see this every month. And one of the questions that came up last month was, we have total revenue of $39.6 million and a total of $49.4 million. This now, the 49.4 million reflects the adjustment, the budget adjustment approved to rebudget over $500,000, well, almost $596,000. So here, the way this report reflects the use of the fund balance, typically would say surplus deficit, and you see this big deficit of $9.7 million. But another way to say that is the use of the fund balance. And I like to explain that use of fund balance. As you can recall, there was here, over here on the right side, you have the explanation. I just showed in the previous screen that the commission approved $7.4 million in uses of reserves, all of the reserves established last year, and an impact of $1.7 million on the fund balance available for budgeting, plus the $596,000 that was approved in September for the rebudget, for a total of $9.7 million. So how does this now tie back to the statement of activity, where the statement of activity quantifies the revenues and expenses, and the revenues are broken down by restricted or committed, or the funds available there. And it shows the reserves that were created in fiscal year 22 per the fund balance policy, including the stabilization fund and the committed fund balance. So here, you know that you get two statements of activity, one for the property tax and one for the sales tax. And here you see the total expenditures. So this statement, I know, is still complex, has a lot of information. And after the evaluation and discussion with the county team, we added some additional detail. But I do believe that this report needs to be reflected in a more transparent and way, so that you all as commissioners and for the public, that we can better reflect and track the use of the reserves that were established. Having said that, as you can see here in this report, you have the available fund balance, the fund balance available for budgeting from the last fiscal year is carried over, 10.2 million. You add the revenues that were approved for this fiscal year of 23.9 million, and the minus the expenditures for this fiscal year. So 26.3 million is our normal operating expenditures, and then we broke out the use of reserves. The one IT for 156,000, major maintenance for facilities 264,000, and the capital improvement program of 673,000. So when you subtract, when you add the beginning fund balance, the revenue minus all the expenditures, there is a deficit of 3.5 million. However, these expenditures, these drawdowns for each of the reserves was not reflected in the July and August report. And after my discussions, you could see here the line item that says decrease in IT resource replacement commitment fund balance. So it's a decrease of 556,000. That's what we're using in this fiscal year. For major maintenances, we're using 264,000. And for capital improvement, 673,000, for a total of $1,094,279. If you go back to that screen for the budget, that number appears in the budget.
Myrna, if I can interrupt Andy, Chair Elkind has his hand raised.
Do you want to ask your question now?
Well, just, this is a confusing report, Myrna, so I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but I wanted to just correct one thing that you said up above. That first line in gray is the beginning fund balance available for budgeting. That's correct.
Mhm.
But what's reflected below that really has nothing to do with that. I think what it is if you look at the revenues, which is the next line, and you subtract the expenditures on those four lines, that's what gives you the minus 3.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
all. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I'll just say to the committee, Myrna's going to go through the report the way it is, but we've been talking about the need to change this up so it's easier to understand. And I'd like to get into some discussion on that once she's finished her talk. So I'm sorry, I'll let you go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. So the line here that says net change in fund balance is 2.4 million. If you go back to the screen with the budget and you add the rebudget amount of $181,000, you end up with an impact to the property tax fund balance of $2.4 million. And so that then results in reflecting these drawdowns against the reserves. It's a benefit to your fund balance available for budgeting. So now the revised number is $7.8 million available for budgeting under the property tax. Below that is an accounting of the use of the reserves. So we had set aside $557,400 for IT. We drew down $156,000. So the remaining balance in that reserve is a $401,000 and change. This was one way of reflecting it. But like I said, with conversations with Chair Elkind and further, feedback from you, I do feel that we need to break out these reserves and account for them in a different way. So this one report doesn't have so much information in it. With that, I also looked at, I don't know why it doesn't. I'm trying to change. There you go. Okay. I also reflected this same logic to the sales tax statement of activity. And there, the revenues are tied back to the budget of 15.7 million. And the total expenditures that also reflects the rebudget of 414 million. And breaking out the use of reserves has an impact on the fund, I wouldn't say impact, I would say these are the revenue minus your expenditures of 6.2 million. And again, here we added the drawdown of the reserves of 104,000 for IT, 176 for major maintenance, and 6 million for capital improvements. So the total use of reserves is 6.3 million. If you go back to the budget, there was a positive impact to the fund balance of 500,000. But with these adjustments, the ending fund balance of available for budgeting is $8.1 million because of how we are reflecting the drawdown of the reserves. And so I try to tie the budget to your monthly statements so that I'm hoping that you can see where this use of words of deficit and use of fund balance tie back to this statement here, and have a fruitful discussion on strategic use of your fund balance, number one, and number two, to further clarify any of these statements. So I'll stop. I'll leave this up in case you have any questions.
I see Barbara's got a hand up. Why don't we start with her, please? Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. I actually understand this report, and I think it's pretty clear. I think the confusion is the use of the actual word reserves. In my mind, a reserve are reserve funds that we put aside for a rainy day, and I think that's how people think of them. And then I understand the drawdown from our capital accounts, and the kind of confusion the way because it was the first time, like you say, we weren't withdrawing from reserves. We were withdrawing from the capital accounts that we set up for these specific reasons, and we took some money out of them. So, that's all clear. So it's the terminology that we're using that I think is still confusing things. And I think that the question I was going to ask, I didn't realize we were going to go into this in this step. The question I was going to ask is, what is the proper way for a public agency to think about money that is in this category called ending balance available for budgeting? Because we didn't do anything. We didn't put any money into that. It's not a thing, an account, a line item. We didn't put any money into it, so we don't draw down out of it. We put money into our reserves. We put money into our capital accounts. And the remainder, the difference is the difference between what we budgeted and it's left over. And I don't know what the terminology should be for that, how we begin to think about that. And that's the question I've asked for the last couple of sessions, is how we get to talking about this in some sort of planning sense. Because, and when a public agency plans for this money that's called available for budgeting, when do we think about budgeting that money? When do we think about putting it into, saving it for different reasons? We'll just use that phrase. But I think that I appreciate your explaining the difference, that we now know that we have close to about $8 million available for budgeting in both property tax and sales tax currently. And those aren't reserved. They're on our books, but those aren't reserved funds. They're the difference between what we've budgeted to spend and what we, and then taking out all the money that we have reserved for certain reasons. And it's the difference. And it's a significant amount of money. And so that's what I don't know. And that's your experience as doing accounting for public agencies. What is the way that you begin to talk about this section? And
I'm going to jump in here, Barbara, if I may, and Myrna, please correct me if I'm stating this improperly. But I agree with your question, but I think it's actually simpler than we have made it in the past. This fund balance available for budgeting is simply an accumulated surplus. It's a surplus of revenue that we have taken in over the years and for whatever reason have not expended and has not been allocated to a specific reserve fund. So it hasn't been set aside for a rainy day fund. It hasn't been set aside for one of the funds we established last year for capital, for IT replacement, for IT capital, for vehicle. It's simply an accumulated surplus that's available for us to draw down in the future. Myrna, am I expressing that accurately?
That is correct. That is exactly correct. I think I have, what can I say is that I can say that I have used the word reserve versus the word committed. And that's another way of explaining this. I mean, if you want to get very technical about the type of bucket we put these funds in, these are we've set aside money, but it's been committed. The commission took an action to set aside and commit these funds for these purposes. And we have used the word reserve. If we want to stay away from that word reserve, I can certainly do that and use the word set aside or commitment. But in general, what Commissioner Elkin said is that the available fund balance that we have, the library has set aside commitments to those funds, but yet you still have separate and above and beyond those commitments, you still have you still have additional funds available for budgeting.
Right. I'm going to jump back in here because I didn't get to quite finish my thought before Andy jumped in there. I wanted to say that I agree with him. It is a surplus. But when we talk about terminology, we need to keep it very clear because we have a lot of interested parties that are when we mix up the terminology, it gets very confusing. Do you have a lot of money? Well, yeah, we do have a lot of money. We do have, we have ending budget balance available for budgeting that we have not reserved, that we haven't spent, we haven't committed, we haven't done anything. It's just in there, and yes, it is a surplus. And so if we're going to use the term, let's use the term consistently if that's what we're talking about it. And it's a surplus until it is budgeted. And that's just what I want to get at, is clarity of language, because we know that a lot of people are looking at our financial situation. So thank you.
Well, I'll go along with the need for us to develop some consistent terminology, and Myrna, let's take that offline and see if we can't come up with something which is consistent with generally accepted accounting practices, but not so obscure that we can't understand it in plain English either. Dave, I know you have a hand up, but Barbara, I did want to comment on something else that you said, because I think there's another reason why this report is confusing, and it's not just the nomenclature. I'm looking at the top section of this, and I'm seeing, okay, we had a beginning fund balance available for budgeting of $8 million. We took in revenues, and then we project revenues, and then we're looking at budgeted expenses. And when we get down to that next gray line, we go, wow, our budgeted expenses are $6.2 million more than our revenues. So, gee, that seems like it's going to impact our fund balance. But, oh, wait a minute, we've already allocated funds previous to this for 3 of these expense categories. So when we look at that, the 104,000, the 176,000, and the 6 million, we're adding that back into what we just took out. And the net is that rather than, gee, having a deficit of 6.25 million that's going to reduce our available fund balance, it's really, we actually are increasing our fund balance by $90,000. So the fact that we're taking something out and then adding it back in just tells me this report is not set up in a way that's simple and easy to understand. So I appreciate the fact that it's clear for you, but I'm gonna, I think we can make this easier, not just for our committee, but for the full commission and for the public to understand what we're doing. And that's what I'm going to try to accomplish with Myrna. Dave, you've been extremely patient. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks. I think we should bite the bullet and confess that we have a large accumulated surplus, even though it makes us look well off, because we are well off. I hate to, burst anybody's bubble here. And I'd also like to avoid the term available for budgeting. Everything is budgeted sooner or later. I would like to say available for spending, if possible. My concern is a political one, a public relations one. We can't play fast and loose with the fact that we've got a pot of money. And so I just like to, be more forthcoming about the fact that we really have a large amount of money that we haven't committed to anything. We got plans, but they're not listed in the commitments. And this is a result of good practices and having less expenditures than we expected. Even the pandemic had its impact. So I appreciate what Andy's saying. Let's try to simplify and clarify this, because the members of the public are not going to be real thrilled with the back and forth here. But I really think we need to be forthright and say these are accumulated surplus or accumulated savings. That's all. Keep struggling. It's good, going in the right direction.
I appreciate that, Dave. And one thing, you know that in the months prior to the start of the new fiscal year, I had been promising month after month that we were going to look at our pension plan and the possibility of making 1 or more additional discretionary payments to shore that up. And we've put that on hold because we needed to get a clearer picture of where we are financially. But as Myrna starts to pin this down and we have increased confidence in the actual amount of our fund balances, we're going to be able to pursue that and take a look at, among other things, how do we judiciously use some of these funds to make sure that all of our staff can feel confident that when they do retire, that they're going to have access to what they're expecting. So I agree with you 100%. We want to be straightforward about it. I think we do need to educate the public about some of the reasons why This has accumulated over the last few years, and you said them, the pandemic has limited our ability to wisely expend some of these funds. Some of the very important capital projects that we have underway have taken longer than expected. We have a legitimate story to tell. We're not sitting hoarding money with no plan for it. It needs to be a process of disclosure and education. And I know that we can draw on, I see Ray Holly's silently on the call, but I know that we can draw on the staff to help craft this message. Deborah, I see you have a hand up.
Well, I was just going to dive in, and you said pretty much what I was going to say, but honestly, we may have money in the bank, but we have also been, during the pandemic, we have also been planning for the future. We're going to be opening on Sunday. That's very expensive. We're and with Roseland as an incentive for all of the other towns and the county to look at the various facilities, there's going to be plenty for us to spend this money on. So we are not swimming in money. And I know that's not what you were saying, David, but
Well, right now
we've got a
we are.
facilities master plan. Well, no, it's
Yes.
on paper, and we have plans, and we're planning to spend that money. So, and we're going to probably spend it and at least have plans, written plans that the public can take a look at before very long at all. So.
Then let me just say, we got to include a category that is something like contingent liabilities or possible expenditures in the future, and stick it in these statements. So we won't have to kind of stumble bum around and say, well, we don't really have this much money in the bank. We do, but we know in the bank today, there's this much money. But we also have plans for it. We ought to have a way to say that in accord with generally accepted accounting principles.
Yeah,
Some
I'm
kind of
not,
contingent liabilities.
I'm not sure that I know where you're going on this. I'm not
Yeah.
sure we can characterize that as a contingent liability, Dave.
I'm
I
not
think
either.
I think we have a story to tell. I mean, you've seen the facilities master plan and
Yeah.
the estimated $250 million in capital it's going to take to accomplish it. You've
Yep.
seen the ADA transition plan, which is also substantial. So I think we have a good and meaningful story to share with the public. And we just all have to get clear on the best way to articulate that. But all of it is predicated on first having a very firm grasp on the money at hand. And that's what Myrna and her team have been working so hard on.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Okay. I'll just, Myrna, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just going to share with the committee that I've asked Myrna if there's now these reports come to us from the county, and Myrna's been in touch with the person who's replaced Randy, and I'm sorry, I'm blocking on her name.
Jennifer Murray.
Okay, and she was on the staff before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Randy had referred to her several times, and they're used to doing things in a certain way, and of course they're going to only do things in a way that are consistent with sound accounting principles. But I've asked Myrna if there's not a way that we can't simplify this by breaking it into two different documents. One which pretty clearly and simply shows us the amount available for budgeting, and the other which gives us a picture of what's happened with the specific fund balances that were committed for different purposes. They started out with so much money, we've spent so much, this is the amount that's left. This report kind of combines both of those, and I think it's just hard to read. Barbara can decipher it, but I really struggle with it. And I think we need both things, but we don't necessarily need them in the same document.
I agree. I feel that, as the finance committee that sees this report every month, it might be easier for you all to understand it since, you look at it and you like study it. But, for someone who, is looking at all libraries and wants to do, check in, a resident that wants to check in, I think we could do a better in reflecting this statement. So I agree. I will continue to work on this to be a little more clear and simplified.
Thank you. Barbara?
I'm not holding fast to the report as it's laid out. I was actually trying to compliment Myrna that I thought it was clear. I understand what you're saying, Andy, in terms of making some changes. So that's totally fine with me. What's frustrating me is that I feel like I'm speaking some other language. For the last 2 meetings, and this I'm reading right out of the agenda minutes. A CFO, Commissioner McKenzie suggested 2 items for future agendas, a CFO-led discussion of allocation of our unrestricted fund balance available for budgeting. So I have asked for this twice, and now it's suddenly like, a new idea. So that's what's a little frustrating to me. I mean, it's very clear to me what, these funds are. And my question has been, when are we going to talk about it? And that's what I thought the finance committee was going to do. And so this isn't, anyway, I feel like I brought this up a couple of times, and now it's a new idea going forward. So anyway, a little frustrating for me. Thank you.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Barbara, because I thought I'd introduce this whole section by crediting you with bringing this up and focusing on it. And if that did not come across clearly, I apologize, because I certainly do not want to suggest or imply that this was something that was new or that Myrna and I identified as a topic. It was your persistence in bringing this to our attention that led us to focus on this. So my apology if that was not clear.
If I may, Commissioner McKenzie, I feel that the questions that you brought up and this question about what is uncommitted fund balance, in doing that analysis, I discovered this error in the statement. So having discovered that error, I think the first step in getting to a response to your question is, what is that available uncommitted fund balance? And this is where we are. And so now that we have that figure, Director Erica Tabolt, it has a plan. She wants to take a look at, now that we know what this figure is, it has been put on staff to provide recommendations to the finance committee and the board. So, but this is the first step to get to that.
Well, I appreciate that. And I had asked for that to be agendized for our finance committee meeting. If you're going to go through the staff route and come back that way, it's fine, as long as it comes to us with some recommendations on how to spend it. Appreciate that update, Myrna.
So do any members of the committee have questions on the other financial reports? We can start at the beginning and go through them, starting with the summary report, if that would be helpful.
My only comment about the summary report, since we're going to have new commissioners, and whether they become a member of this committee or whether they look in to see how the finance committee operates, and then also they will see it in their own reports. We will probably need to explain to new commissioners what the various restricted cash and some of the other divisions are. For example, I'm not sure that a new commissioner would know what the David Charles Johnson Endowment is. So we might just want to expand on those things so that, and remind the rest of the commission what they are as well. But just that note is just a small one. Thanks very much.
Deborah, would you like to make that an agenda item for the commission, or do you want to have I don't know, a separate session to look?
Well, I think we can possibly do it in the training when we get our additional 2 commissioners on board. Or it could just be a running thing in the intranet so that there's maybe a document that explains the various things that are in the budget. Do we think that needs to be a commission item? Or I think it's just probably just information, just clarifying information.
Yeah, if we're going to do a training session, I think that would be an ideal spot to do it. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Barbara.
Yeah, question so questions on the summary report. This is a quarter of a year, 25%. And Andy, as you always remind us to look, we're 25% through the year and we'll look for items that are over that. This just, I'm sure there's a reason for this, but under rents and leases, it's 34.2%. And rather than a particular explanation for that, what it triggered for me was what discussion have we had since we talked earlier a few months ago about our lease running out on headquarters property. And I haven't heard anything since then. And I know it's not agendized for conversation today, but I don't know whether that conversation should happen in the finance committee or the commission, or if we can get an update on the thoughts for the lease for headquarters in particular.
I can leap in and say, I think we will probably get an update next month. Erica has been working on this.
And for the percentage is that this quarterly report actually includes the October rent. So we pay it so happens that we pay the rent we issue the check in September for the October rent so that our landlord gets it 1st of October.
Yeah,
so 4 months in there.
This is this is one of the items that does appear at first to be out of line. It looks like there were 2 rent payments during the month of August, and we talked about this last month. And probably if we always paid in the month before, this would never happen. But if up to a certain point, if, for example, we paid for July on July 1, we paid for August on August 1, and paid for September on August 31, and then paid for October on September 30th, that's what this would look like.
Yeah, there are 2 payments in August because we did not have a lease at Occidental. And so that lease was not approved until August, I believe. And then that's when we made a payment for July and August.
Right. Again, I wasn't concerned about that percentage. It just jogged my memory about we haven't talked about headquarters lease for a while. So that was my intro to the topic, but Deborah assures me that we'll talk about it at the commission meeting. So thank you.
Okay. The other item, I noticed it, but didn't necessarily feel a need to dwell on it. Other contract services are running well ahead of what we would expect, but we went through this last year. And in fact, other contract services are running significantly below where they were in the year before.
Right.
And I think our experience has just been that some of these things are front loaded.
Well, yes, in the CFO report for the month of August, in your October, the commission October report, it explained that in other contract services, there's subscriptions and contracts that are paid up front for the entire year.
Yeah.
And one in particular that was paid in September and approved by the commission was over $100,000. I can't remember what Circe, I think it was. So that's why you see that high number there. It'll smooth out later in the fiscal year, is my expectation.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on our summary? Okay, next page, please, Lisa. Cash balance summary. This seems straightforward. I didn't have any questions. Does anyone else? No? Okay. Next page, please, Lisa. Okay, statement of special fund activity. We've gone through this. Let's there we go. Voucher payments over $50,000. This is the second month that we've had a pretty substantial bill for PG&E. I think when we talked last month, Myrna, you were going to check with Dave and see if there was something, if this was, we thought, gee, maybe the August bill was tied to the very hot weather we had, but do you have any insight into why we're seeing this now? We haven't seen it historically.
Right, that's my understanding, is that pretty much we saw spikes in a couple of months, and it was due to the warmer weather. But we haven't seen any, like if there were any unusual charges, except for, that there's been increased usage. I don't know if Dave is on here.
I don't see him, no. Yeah. And any other questions or comments on this report? Okay, and then we get into the detail reports, property tax and sales tax. The questions that I had with regard to the property tax were the ones from last month that you answered, and we talked about, as Barbara was saying, I tend to kind of slavishly look at the percentages, and it was the extra help that stood out. But of course, you explained that. I did not have any other particular questions on these reports, but I want to open it up to any member of the committee who does. Barbara, Dave, Deborah, do you have anything from these detail reports?
No.
And just a note about PG&E, the rates have been skyrocketing everywhere.
Yeah.
So if our bills at home, those of us who don't have solar panels, if our bills at home are rocketing up, then the libraries is going to rocket up even faster.
Yeah, agreed. Mike, I see you've got a hand up.
Yeah, the PG&E, I don't have exact numbers or causes. However, there have been articles recently in the PG or in the Press Democrat about raising rates in PG&E 10-20% in certain cases. So with that in mind, I'm not surprised to see a jump in our PG&E for the library.
No, I wasn't either. I think we'll just have to watch this going forward. Thanks.
So maybe an opportunity for us
to go green, right? Let's talk for just a moment about topics that you would like to see for future Finance Committee meetings. Barbara, have anything you'd like to put in front of us?
I don't know if you received an email from Commissioner Ingbarth, but I was talking to him the other day about something else. And he mentioned the fact that the classification changes and stuff appear on the full commission agenda, and perhaps those should come through the Finance Committee first for more expediency, and then a recommendation to the commission. That's a thought from him. I don't know if you heard from him about that. And I'm just wondering.
I'm sorry, classification of what?
The employee classifications, like on our agenda for the commission meeting last time. I think that we have one or two of those. We've gotten quite a few of those changes, the changes in staff classification, and then they come to us for approval at the commission level.
So are you saying that you think if there's going to be a change in classification before the full commission, that it should come here first?
He asked me why we didn't get them first, and I said, I don't know. Why don't you send an email to Andy, and then, so,
Okay, as I recall, the change in classification had a very minimal dollar impact.
I know.
I think it was like $1,200 a year.
Right.
Personally, I don't feel a need to review that in the finance committee. If others of you feel differently, I would take it under consideration, but
I think he was saying the reverse, Andy, is a kind of a small, as you said, it was kind of a small thing to have it put before the whole commission for discussion, rather than have it as smaller things come through us for kind of the filter and approval, and then make a recommendation, which might speed things up at the commission level.
oh, okay, all right.
What could happen is if the finance committee does review it and you make a recommendation of approval, it could go on consent at the commission level.
Right. I think that was the intent of what he was saying.
Okay,
So, and the other thing, I just wasn't sure when we were talking about the reports, the revised reports at the beginning of this meeting, are they still in process of revision? Because it's still not quite, as consolidated and everything as I hope. They're kind of in different formats and all that different stuff. Were we done? Or is this the new reporting that we're getting?
Well, this report is the quarterly report. So the
Right.
monthly report would be a little more condensed. You wouldn't get the whole schedule of by account, for example, that would not be here. But all the others, per your request, you continue to ask for the statement of activity that it shows the fund balance. So it's really probably just minus one, the schedules of all the detail by account that would be not there next month.
This is what it's going to look like. It was just, at one point in time, I had mentioned what our reports used to look like 2018 or something. And I don't know if you've ever had a chance to look at. But when I get these things, they're all different sizes. There's all different formats, sideways, up and down, all kinds of ways. To me, it's not a real consolidated monthly report, but I'm not going to make a big deal about it. I was just wondering if we were done.
Again, I'm sorry if I was not clear, because I thought that was the very first thing that I said in the meeting, is that we are in progress on this. And particularly with regard to the printing, Lisa is aware that this did not turn out as well as we would like it to in the future. So I don't think that you're seeing the reports in their final format. I think Myrna and her team are still working on what's going to be included. And Lisa and I will take this offline in terms of the formatting and appearance, so we can make it as clean and straightforward as possible. Okay.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you bet. Dave?
Yeah, I want to mention something that I mentioned a little bit last time. Now we see the $500,000 for the Roseland Library in our accounting system. Let's remember, this project is shared with the city and the foundation. The foundation is going to be collecting maybe nothing or maybe $25 million for construction. I have no idea how the money is going to be handled, who's going to handle which pieces of it. But I see that now part of it is in our accounting system, not the foundation's. It's fine with me. And again, I think I mentioned last time, I have no clue about the professional way of accounting for funds with so many sources and with so many sources and pots of money lying around. I just want to don't let this totally vanish from our radar screen. We don't have an urgent matter here. The kickoff for the campaign is November, 10th, I think. But soon we're going to have a lot of money, except it may not be we at all. It may be the foundation, or it could be that the city of Santa Rosa is going to be holding the big pot. So anyway, just to bear that in mind. You think what we discussed today was complicated. Okay, never mind. And Myrna, thank you for your work on this. All this stuff, it's a multi-dimensional puzzle. And that's just how modern accounting is.
Well, Dave, I appreciate your concern about the funds for the Rosen Library. And I think that that is something that's either under discussion already or will be between the library and the foundation and the city of Santa Rosa. So maybe we can get a report on that or at least an update at a future meeting. I'll look into that.
That would be great. I know that Erica said she was meeting with the city staff, including our lawyer. I think it was almost immediately after our last finance committee meeting. I think that's right.
Okay.
But anyway, this is good progress. And Myrna, I appreciate your patience with the folks who are not CPAs here.
Yes. Thank you. Deborah.
I was just going to say that I think the commission as a whole will be interested in the question that David raises. So it may not just come to the finance committee. It would probably just come to the commission.
I
So,
think that would be even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? Okay, it's 4:06. We stand adjourned. Thank you all, as always, for your careful consideration, due diligence, and the care that you bring to this meeting. Myrna, thank you for leading us so capably. And Julie, welcome to the team. We're very, very happy to have you. Look forward to working with you. Lisa, thanks for managing us, and everybody take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Mira. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.